All right, all right. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
If you don't complain within 12 months, please, cut it up, cut it up, cut it up, cut it up.
So I want all the girls watching here and now to know that a new day is on the horizon.
All right, all right, all right. So, welcome everyone. My name is Chelsea Wright, and I'm the founder, chief feminist in charge of Girls Who Know JA, which is a nonprofit grassroots organization that's youth led. And what we do is try to raise awareness about the sexual and reproductive health and rights of adolescent females in Jamaica. So, again, welcome to the first staging of the hashtag Unfiltered Understanding Sexual Harassment Summit. Most of us gather here in search of knowledge that we should have been taught in school, knowledge that should have been public education in the first place. Others of us are here to stand in solidarity as allies with the many that have been victims, no, survivors of sexual violence, abuse, and harassment. For the survivors among us, I am holding space for you. We are holding space for you. For far too long, we have been silenced and vilified. And as we host this summit, we are standing on the shoulders of giants who have paved the way before us. Honestly, it doesn't matter who or what you're here for, but I guarantee you that over the next 3 days, you will learn something, feel something, and be inspired to do something about how our women are treated in Jamaica. Today is all about understanding the Sexual Harassment Bill and what laws protect Jamaican citizens against sexual offenses. Don't be afraid to ask your questions in the chat box. Make we chat, make we learn. We are completely hashtag unfiltered. So as I continue, it is my true delight to introduce to you this afternoon's moderator, Shantae Shan. Shantae is a YouTuber, entrepreneur, and speaker who is of the influence of Christ and his blessings. Shantae has created a brand that exudes excellence. She was born in Portmore, Jamaica, and is currently studying in the States on a full scholarship at Lafayette College, studying engineering studies and economics. She's very passionate about education, motivation, fitness, and making the most out of what life has to offer. So, without further ado, this is Miss Shantae Shan.
Hello, everybody. Wagwan. Thank you for that intro, Chelsea. And let's get right into it. So, today's theme is breaking down the bill. And for our speakers, we have some very, very established people, some experts in the field. And let me just introduce them. First up on our panel, we have Christopher Harper. Let me just give you his intro right now. He's a human rights and social justice advocate and an attorney at law based in Kingston, JA. He's committed to ensuring that the rights of people are respected, protected, and fulfilled. He has spent the last 4 years tackling the legislative and policy frameworks that limit the potential of children and youth at the national, regional, and international levels. He is desirous of making a significant contribution towards the establishment of enabling a sustainable environment within which youth can achieve their fullest potential and become positive agents of change. That's Christopher Harper for you. And we also have Melissa Sims. She's currently working as a legal officer within the UN. Prior to this, Melissa worked at the International Criminal Court located in The Hague, Netherlands. Yes, she traveled. That's right. Okay. As a prosecutor in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Jamaica. Melissa has a keen interest in remaking the criminal adjudication process with focus on developing responsive systems to survivors of crimes, in particular survivors of sexual violence. Melissa's recent work in CARICOM involves a process review of the criminal adjudication of sexual violence cases from report to sentencing. This process culminated in the establishment of the first court in CARICOM based in Antigua and Barbuda, which is solely dedicated to sexual violence cases. And the last two panelists I'm going to introduce to you are very close people to me. We went to the same school, okay, Ready Strong Campion College. We have Lauren Less, who is a second-year law student at the University of the West Indies, and she's always had an interest in bringing awareness to sexual violence in Jamaica and hopes to continue through education and outreach in the future. And then we also have Kayla Wright, a law student who aspires to be an environment and intellectual property lawyer and an advocate for the equality before the law of both women and men who are victims of sexual offenses. So thank you guys so very much. Can we see our panelists come on right now? Where are
All right, so
they? All right.
we'll be adding them in a few. But
Okay.
before we get started, I just wanted to get a feel of how, you know, how is everyone feeling, and how, like, what are you excited for the panel, Shanti? Like, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to learning a lot more. As you said, this is knowledge that should have been taught publicly. Like, this shouldn't have to be something that an organization has to take up on itself. It should be the duty of the government to ensure that young people are equipped with the knowledge to protect themselves and other persons as well. So I'm looking to just learn a whole lot and also just engage with people, like-minded people who want to make change in society.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I'm really excited to see, you know, people's reaction, you know, learning things that I think not a lot of, you know, us as Jamaicans know. When we heard about the Joint Select Committee meeting and what Minister, you know, the Justice Minister said,
right,
misinterpreted it to mean something that it was not. And I feel like we just need to set the facts straight. Yes, he was still wrong, but we still have a far way to go. So
right.
I'll let the panelists hop in.
Okay, so before we have our panelists join us, we're going to go on Girls Who Know their Instagram page. We're going to start a giveaway, so you need to stay in tuned with our conversation because we're going to be posting on the IG and we're going to have a giveaway for the person who answers the question correctly. It's going to be random, but once you comment the right answer to the question, then you're going to be the winner, or you have the chance rather to win a Girls Who Know t-shirt that says my name. Like, have you ever seen the t-shirts? I absolutely love them. Okay, so I'm gonna go on their Instagram to see what they've posted so far. So you guys need to do so as well. Ensure that you are following them and using the hashtag Unfiltered Girls Who Know Summit. And yeah, just tag up a bag of people. That's right. So Girls Who Know JA, that is what it looks like. Let's see if we could focus. Yeah. And we need to see people following and keeping up with our posts, right? So ensure that you are following us. Okay, so we're just going to give our panelists a few more minutes to work out any technical difficulties they're having so that we could have them on here and we could ask them the riveting questions that we have, because personally I have quite a bit and I'm pretty sure you guys have questions as well. As I say, we want to learn, we want to just grow and just do better. And in order to do better, you have to know better. So that's just kind of the energy that we are promoting in this forum today. So let's just give them a couple of minutes to get situated and get our panelists in check.
Okay, so we're just about to add one of our panelists, but before Shante, me and Antoinette, we're gonna hop on and tell the people a bit more about who and what Girls Who Know is, because I feel like we hop straight into it, but we never give them the rundown. So that's what we're gonna do right now. All right, so Girls Who Know is as I said, grassroots nonprofit organization that really does, outreach and underground work. We're very, very, very passionate about what we do. So naturally, when those comments were made, so we just get riled up. And I mean, in our presence, in Girls Who Know, we have a lot of survivors. So you can just imagine how triggering it was to see the person who was supposed to be the beacon of light, in in Jamaica, saying such like awful things, really. Like it was just distasteful and awful. So Antoinette, can you tell them like why, or like the process of us like formulating the summit and what we went through before we welcome on the panelists?
Definitely. So at first, there was a surge of discussion on Twitter with women sharing their experiences with sexual harassment, sexual abuse, stating their ages and stuff. And for us, that really triggered us to take action and to chime into that discussion and to be able to be an outlet and a channel that informed women of what was going on, and to be a safe space for them as well, where they could DM us or reach out to us if they needed help, and to just really provide them with info and resources that would help. And so from that, coupled with what the Justice Minister had said, we really thought it was imperative for us to host this summit, launch this summit. And immediately we just went straight into planning and all the logistics behind production and everything. And here we are today because the public, again, needs to be educated. There are things that need to be clarified by experts in the field. And we really just want our young people to be empowered as a result of this. So
here we are, right? And before we, hop off and let the panelists hop back in, I just want to say, like, I'm just so excited and I'm just pumped. And I hope that, you guys that are watching get as much out of this as we have put in.
Same. Okay, so we will now welcome our panelists, Christopher Harper, Melissa Sings, and Kayla Wright.
Hello, hello, panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have everybody. We have Kayla, we have Melissa, we have Christopher, we
I'm
don't have
here.
Lauren. Yes. Okay, I guess we'll just have to get started, and Lauren will join us a little bit later. All right, so let's get to the meat of the matter. What are the different sexual offenses, and what kind of differentiates them? Let's just start off with what is a sexual offense? What makes it, what's the stark difference between, like a sexual offense and like a loving up? You know what I mean? Like, what is the difference between those things?
Christopher,
Feel
do you
free,
want to go
anybody.
ahead? Christopher,
Oh,
you're
we
on
can't hear
mute.
you.
Can't hear you.
No, I'm saying start because I'm trying to find my bearings.
Okay. Well, Shante, I always like to start off the discussion around sexual violence by kind of locating it in terms of the context of how it manifests and the status of it in our society. So one of the things, is that sexual violence is actually very high incidence of sexual violence within the Caribbean itself. And then Jamaica also has very high incidence of sexual violence. But often when we approach the discussion of sexual violence, we seem to treat it in a very disjunctive way. So we talk about the high incidence of sexual violence in our society, but we don't make the correlation between those very high incidents and or generally very high rates of sexual violence. Now, to take it to the granular level as to what sexual violence is, I always find the definition given by the World Health Organization as very useful in understanding the wide ambit of sexual violence and how it manifests through different sexual acts, which your question is pinpointing. But sexual violence very broadly is really any sexual conduct, any sexual act, any attempts towards those sexual acts, unwanted comments and unwanted advances that are directed at the sexuality of persons, whether through different forms of coercion. So the coercion can be subtle, while the coercion can be driven by extreme violence. So that's a definition that I like to use because I think it is fairly comprehensive and captures the most serious to what is society considers the less serious sexual offenses.
Thank you for that. That's a very holistic definition, and I think I can understand it. An average person should be able as well. So it's when somebody tries to coerce you, to commit some form of sexual activity. Right, got it. So we have a definition of sexual violence. How does the Jamaican legislation, how does it address all of that? Would you say we have a very robust legislation, or shortcomings? Anybody feel free to just take that on.
Okay, I think one of the main shortcomings with our legislation that is aimed towards, protecting persons from sexual offenses is that it's not equal in terms of gender. So when we look at the Sexual Offences Act itself, there are no provisions protecting men where regards rape. So certain things like that, there's disparity in the protection of each gender. There's preference made to women, and rightly so, but there should also be, consideration for men who do go through these things, but because of, stigmas attached to these things, they are discouraged from, reporting it because the law doesn't protect them and they think they'll be ridiculed. So I think that's one of the shortcomings with our legislation.
Got it. And how does the Jamaican law protect citizens from sexual violence?
Well, I think in looking at it, I usually like to not only look at Jamaica's legal framework, but what the international legal framework is, because Jamaica, as an independent state, always operates within two streams of law, the international law as well as the domestic legal framework. But often, as policymakers at the level of government and other stakeholders in the society, Jamaica's obligation is only primarily looked at within the context of its domestic laws. Now, I think Jamaica's international obligations in relation to dealing with sexual violence is an important point to understand, because there's a very comprehensive framework at that level, as reflected in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention against the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the UN Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, as well as regionally, when you're looking at the Inter-American Convention, that also speaks to the issue of sexual violence. Now, there are other important instruments at the international level, but together, all of them basically weave together an obligation on Jamaica to, one, prescribe very effective and comprehensive laws, and secondly, to put in place a very victim survivor-centered system that supports survivors' participation in the criminal adjudication process. I'll leave it to Chris or another panelist to go into, the domestic framework.
Hi, everyone. So I like that Melissa just took it from that perspective, because one thing we need to understand and appreciate is that when it comes to Jamaica following through with its international obligations, there's this whole monitoring element to it. And what we find at the different monitoring stages is that there are a lot of recommendations coming from the UN, the respective committees, which will say that in terms of our domestic laws that protect victims against sexual violence, they are short or they're inadequate in these particular ways. And in many instances, the language is framed as they are inconsistent with the obligations that the state has to really protect victims, amongst other things. But what we end up finding is that even though the state and legal will to actually amend our legislation to be consistent with a lot of these recommendations are pretty much non-existent, and that's the current struggle we have. I know in 2009 is when we would have amended or brought in the Sexual Offences Act, which is the main piece of legislation that really addresses sexual violence currently in Jamaica. And you would think 2009, that would have been an opportunity to present some modern, some progressive, some really, positions or provisions that would properly address the issue of sexual violence in the country. But Here we see a lot of the status quo was maintained. It didn't really... It was responsive at best, like a knee-jerk type of reaction without thinking what are the implications of the law going forward. And that's why we have all these challenges surrounding sexual violence and who truly is protected. I know Kyla would have opened with the fact that it doesn't really offer protection to our men and our boys. And that's one of the main or fundamental gaps in our legislation, because when we think about the Sexual Offences Act, it covers rape, grievous sexual assault, incest, sexual intercourse with a person under 16, sexual grooming, every type of, violent act that you could reasonably contemplate. However, the specific framing of these provisions is what gives the limitations and what prevents it from being actually something that truly tackles violence at the root, as opposed to anything else.
Gotcha. And if you could just delve into the framing. So personally, I was doing this psychology class, and one of the topics that we're looking into is like cross-cultural psychology, and one of the topics was gender inequality and all of that, just all of that stuff. And we had to look at different countries, and of course, being from Jamaica, I wanted to do Jamaica. And in doing research, I know you don't have any paradise place. I know I'm aware of that, and I'm aware of the deficiencies when it comes down to men and women within Jamaica, the society. And it turns out that Jamaica is actually the number 2, like the second biggest murderer of women worldwide. Like 11 out of every 100,000 women was murdered in 2017, like due to sexual violence. I know that we have a far way to go. but how like at the grassroots, how can these things be implemented, and how was the framework not in alignment with what was like prescribed by UN? And in that too, could you walk me through the process of how to just like reporting sexual offenses and violence? Anybody wants to take that up, by the way?
Hi.
Hey,
Well,
Lauren.
I'm having an echo. Okay, never mind. Yes. So I thought that Kayla bringing up males and the gender disparity in Jamaica, I think it's more of a reflection of our society where, in Jamaica, men are tough. There's no such thing as male rape in our laws. But anyways, so how to report sexual violence. It's just typical like how you report any other crime to the police. You have to have your case. You have to have some sort of evidence. But we have a disparity where when we report sexual violence, it's not brought for it. How do I explain it? In Jamaica, we don't take sexual violence reports seriously. So you'll hear that people get raped. You'll hear that children get molested. You'll hear about domestic abuse cases. You'll hear about women getting murdered, their partners murdering them and their children. But that's the only way that it really reaches a point of seriousness in Jamaica when somebody gets murdered. Because you'll never hear a case where somebody is arrested and gets multiple years for rape or sexual assault. It always has to reach the point of murder. So it would go through the normal processes of any sort of illegal acts, but never be as serious or systematically will never, not us, our girls will know, but systematically it is never, it currently is not as serious as every other crime.
Well,
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, if I may offer some perspective, because I think Lauren's response, it touches on one of the main challenges with how we're managing sexual violence in Jamaica, which is that most of the discussion is focused on the legislation without equal resources and deliberation being directed towards the system which supports the management, the prosecution, the investigation of sexual violence. So when you look at how sexual offense matter moves through the criminal justice system, the complainant would go to a doctor if it is a recent complaint. They then go to the police, they make a formal report. At that time, the police may take them to the doctor, or if they have already gone to the doctor, will follow up to get the medical certificate. And then the matter is placed before the lower courts at the resident magistrate's level. And then there needs to be a determination at that particular phase whether there is sufficient evidence on the file for the matter to be transmitted, depending on the type of offense it is, to the High Court. Now, I worked on a project in Antigua that looked at how matters move through the system from report to sentencing or to the end of the matter in the courts. And there it was on average almost 3 years. Now, in relation to Jamaica, where we have a serious backlog, I'm sure if the cases were to be analyzed from that perspective, you may find that a complainant waits many more years longer after they have reported to the matter being completed, which brings me back to the main point that the government really needs to look at its system to develop one that is consistent with international standards, which is one that is a multi-sectoral approach that incorporates the main stakeholders, and one that is victim survivor centered. So one of the things I would hope that Jamaica will move towards is to develop what we call these one-stop centers, where once a person survives a sexual assault, they can go to that center, and the medical, the reporting to the police, as well as the psychosocial support that prepares them for the judicial process can be done in one place to reduce this additional stress on the complainant, who now needs to navigate these separate bodies in order to ensure that their matter is properly noted as a complaint within the justice sector.
And
Wow.
if I could
Yes,
add to
go ahead.
what Melissa is saying, because she did a good, like an excellent job outlining the different stages, but we also need to appreciate all the challenges, specific challenges at each stage. And a lot of these challenges are cultural challenges, social challenges, institutional challenges. So when we think about a health center, for example, in many instances, this is the first place where a victim will sexual violence. And you will have healthcare workers who stigmatize victims, who re-victimize victims, who add to the challenges, the delays. And then after you've gotten through that stage and you get to the police now, that's a whole other conversation, because we have police officers who themselves perpetuate violence. And these are some of the things that whenever we talk about sexual violence in Jamaica, we're never really looking at it. We look at things isolated. So we say, how does the law work? How does the police work? How does that work? Without realizing that everything operates within one system, which is geared towards really allowing a victim to achieve redress or obtain redress and get them to that point where they're able to recover and to basically feel like themselves once more. But you see, part of the problem with even how we legislate here in Jamaica is that, one, whenever we talk about sexual violence, it's never really victim-centered. It's never done from a human rights-based approach. And even when we think about sexual violence, in many instances, it's linked to sexual discrimination or sex discrimination, but that's not the perspective that our policymakers are taking it from. It's very outdated, black and white. How do we, or how have we perceived or conditioned sexual violence over the years, without realizing that there have been substantive changes surrounding the development of these areas. And I think that's something that needs to happen for us to actually achieve any form of substantive, I guess, legal reform or environment reform in Jamaica. Like, we can't just separate and have these isolated conversations without realizing that what happens at the health center affects what happens there. If a police officer doesn't properly record everything, or if a police officer is complacent in their investigation, then that affects the entire judicial process. And that's why so many persons are not only hesitant to navigate these spaces and systems, but that's also another reason why many of them can't get justice, because simply the institutions are from the get-go framed or established or set up against them.
Right. So we have lots of battle stuff. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, because Christopher's point about the institutional, the cultural, and it can't be black and white, definitely. We need a societal shift. The thing is, our institution is reflecting our society. Our society doesn't take these things seriously. Our culture in Jamaica, we don't take sexual assault and sexual violence seriously. That's why the health centers stigmatize against these people. The police don't record these instances properly, and people take years to report because they're scared. They don't feel comfortable. The victims do not feel comfortable reporting these instances. So though we need an institutional change, we'll need a whole cultural shift to perpetuate this institutional shift. First, we have to change how we think about how we approach sexual violence, how we approach the reporting of sexual violence to our communities, to bringing awareness to it. Because some of us, we don't even realize, well, not us specifically, but a lot of Jamaican people don't even realize their attitude, their negative attitude towards sexual violence. And it's perpetuated in every step of the way. So I just love that point.
You know, Lara, I'll jump in there to say that because of how our system is, a part of the challenge is that the delay is so significant that it has contributed to what I call the commodification of some sexual violence cases. And what I mean by that is that we have survivors, complainants who are living the reality of Jamaica, which for many, it's a very stressful economic environment. And so it is, they may have a complaint before the court and they have been involved in the process for so long, and then someone comes, perhaps connected to the accused or not, but then offers them a financial incentive to not participate in the case. And so very often you find that matters are brought to a premature end because the complainant is no longer willing to continue with the process. Now, of course, there are many moralistic views you can take of the complainant's decision in cases where they take the financial incentive. But I think instead of shifting greater blame and focus on the acts of the complainant, we really need to look at what in the system is driving people towards making these very extreme choices. And so I support Lara and other panelists in advocating for the state to not only be so pinned to the legal framework, but to also pay equal and greater attention to the support systems that are there to ensure that matters are successfully prosecuted, with the survivor being front and center in how this is done.
I agree with that, Melissa. Lauren, that was a very good point. I think one thing that could influence their decision is that they've never seen a successful case like that. Like it has never, I've personally never seen a very successful case when it comes down to sexual violence and somebody winning and also not being ridiculed by society. You know, it's kind of a, like if you go up, you lose. And if you don't, then you lose as well. So it's kind of whenever the lady steps forward, she has so many things to consider. Her reputation is at stake. Community members, family members, her relationship, her children. Like it's a lot. And I guess they just have to see the bigger picture of why it is that they should come out and stand up for their rights and, you know, and defend themselves in court. But as you said, there are lots of moralistic views you could go with as it relates to why they would take, you know, that financial let's say bribe. Yeah, but let's go to a few of the comments that we're receiving from our live stream on YouTube. And somebody's asking about verbal harassment. And I know that in Jamaica, like they are absolutely very much so unfiltered. And it can get really challenging, especially as a, you know, as a young girl, whenever I used to go to school and you have old elderly men harassing you, and they're not touching you, but their words feel as if they've already stripped your clothes off. Literally, that's how the words feel. And I know internationally, like there are laws against verbal harassment, but what is it like what does the law say against that, if anything, as it relates to verbal harassment in Jamaica? Christopher or Melissa or Lauren, go ahead.
I think that's where the sexual harassment bill will come in, because the sexual harassment bill is an extension basically where it will include things like that, like verbal. I don't know if this bill specifically includes verbal harassment, but different types of harassment, like men touching you, or workplace harassment, workplace sexual harassment. I think in Jamaica, because of how our judicial, the lack of our judicial system is we can't even, more while we can't even prosecute for murder. So it's kind of difficult. I'm not sure. Me personally, I don't know. I'm not sure how, but I'm sure Christopher or Melissa have suggestions as to how this law could be brought about verbal harassment.
So in terms of verbal harassment, I guess the context matters, but I guess based on the question that was asked, they're referring to it quite generally, like quite broadly. And I know under the proposed street harassment bill that's currently being discussed, it currently doesn't allow for or doesn't protect against harassment which takes place in the public spaces, in the streets, amongst other things. And I know there was a strong lobby behind that to say, how can we ensure that the law covers this? Because this is a reality, and street harassment, which in many spaces is verbal harassment or manifests as verbal harassment, is in fact a problem. But there is no other law that really treats verbal harassment. But I would also imagine that in a private type of matter, like someone bringing a tortious claim of assault, could constitute this whole idea of verbal harassment. But how many persons are willing to bring forward that claim, or how receptive is our justice system of a common law offense as opposed to one that is statutorily prescribed or mandated?
Gotcha.
I think that this also goes back to, you know, our beliefs as a society, because street harassment, you know, verbal harassment, they become so normalized, and oftentimes it's brought back to the victim, like, what were you wearing then? Who are you with? And that's unfair, obviously. And yes, so it's become so normalized in Jamaican society that oftentimes when this does happen to you, you're discouraged from, seeking redress in any form or any sort of way. So I think all this really does go back to us needing a societal shift.
Right. So a lot of the conversation has been geared towards societal shift, changing a society. And as monumental as that might sound, what do you think are some steps that not even just law, but regular people like you and me, what do you think we can do to help bring about this societal change? Because when you get down to the meat of the matter, it's culture, it's people, it's habits, it's trends. How can we affect that, in order to create a better environment and one that, is against sexual violence, sexual harassment, sexual offenses? Or what can we do? What can the average person who is tuned in right now, what is it that we can do to create such a change? For each of you, so you guys could
Yeah,
go
all
from
right.
Melissa.
So if I
Yeah.
may, to kick off this one is I like for example, this forum is one such example because if it's anything I realize is that public education plays a major role in how a lot of these, I guess, laws and just these things are perceived and understood because as someone who works at GFJ, we do a lot of legal literacy trainings, we do a lot of sensitization sessions. And when we go into the communities, like we're going to grassroots communities, we go into schools, we go all over. And what I found as a facilitator is that when you have audience members or participants who come into a space clueless about their rights, clueless about these laws, and then you give them the perceptions, you give them the perspectives, you build their capacity, you allow them to take a step back and appreciate what actually exists to protect them, then you find that greater sense of appreciation. And usually when we leave these spaces, we encourage that the information shouldn't just die here. Like we're building a capacity so that you can take that information forward. So if a community member comes forward and they participate in a conversation, go back to your community and pass on that information. Allow others to really know what's at stake. And I'll give you an example to show how this whole sexual violence conversation is received. So when we talk about the rape provision, many persons are actually not aware of the fact that men are not protected under our rape laws here in Jamaica because how people perceive rape is different from what the law defines as rape. So people see rape and say, no, that is rape, this must be rape. But then when you give them what the law says, they're like, but that's problematic. How can the law not go as far or so far to protect the victims when this is obviously to us, with no legal training, no legal expertise, no legal mind, to us, this is rape. And then when you allow them to really digest that perspective, you'll find that they're more vocal, they are more willing or interested in participating in any kind of democratic process surrounding changing these kind of laws or transforming them. And that's really where it comes from, to give them this perspective that allows them to challenge their own beliefs. And in many instances, that allows them to develop a position where they actually are fully invested or committed to doing something about it.
Gotcha.
Okay, I fully agree with Christopher. Awareness. A lot of people, a lot of Jamaican people, as we said, they're not aware of their rights. They're not aware of how the law impacts them. A lot of men are not aware that they be harassed or raped, that is not even considered rape under the law. But I think my suggestion would be generational awareness, because the generations above us, the elders, they are already, a lot of them are stuck in a mindset already. A lot of them are very complacent with expanding their views on sexual violence or anything generally. So I think a good suggestion would be to start with the children, to start with the younger generation, through schools, through the guidance counseling, because we don't learn about sexual violence. We don't learn about sex education in our schools. Most schools don't know anything about these things. Most children don't know anything about these things. Most children, I've heard instances where girls don't know that they had their first period because they don't know what a period is. So when the youth because everything, when you want to inspire a cultural shift, you have to start with the youth because it's going to take generations to actually perpetuate this shift. So my
Yeah.
suggestion would be through the education system in high school specifically and grade 6, through the guidance counselors, start teaching about sexual violence, start teaching about sexual education and sexual health. Get the youth to understand their rights so they can further. So when they are abused, when their rights are abused by elders who do not understand these things, they can defend themselves. And through defending themselves, they are also shifting the mindset of the elders because they are showing the elders that no, this is not right. This is not right. This is wrong. This is illegal. So it will allow, it's a soft way of manifesting a change to the generations.
Yes, I mean, I can only jump in to compliment what Christopher and Lauren has said, which is to also look at stakeholders because, I mean, we like to believe in the power of the people and that power is centered there and that often, social change comes as a result of that. But stakeholders have to be targeted in the sensitization for them to fully understand what sexual violence is, for them to fully understand what a survivor-centered justice system looks like, and also for them to be educated for people who are participating at the different levels, whether you're the prosecutor, you're the judge, you're the police officer, you're the nurse, that they are also sensitized to their responsibility towards survivors of sexual violence and that they go through some kind of training that helps them to recognize their own implicit bias so that they can work in a very active way, mindful of those things. Because I remember one of my first awareness of sexual violence was when I was in primary school. And I remember very early in the morning as we were on way to school that the vehicles were coming, that were coming in our direction had their headlights on. And I remember when I asked about it, it was that a judge had imprisoned a complainant because she was speaking softly. And the judge kept asking the complainant to speak up, and apparently not achieving that, the response of the judge was to have the person remanded. So, this happened years ago. Very fresh in my mind, and I know that persons who are directly involved in the criminal adjudication process at the different levels can speak to encountering people who are so unsuited to be dealing with such delicate issue that they add to what we now understand to be secondary trauma to survivors that comes as a result of them interfacing with the different systems that become involved whenever it is they report an offense of sexual violence.
Wow. I'm sorry, Caleb. I just have to interject. He thought it was just necessary to put her in. What?
Yes, I remember that very distinctly. It's one of the memories of my childhood, and something that I reflect on often whenever I'm dealing with, survivor-centered issues. How important the attitude of stakeholders, is in relation to dealing effectively with survivors and dealing with the processes involving them.
Wow. Caleb, the floor is yours.
Okay, I think that, Christopher, with, outlining how organizations like Girls Who Know, will effect such a change, and Lauren talking about education, and Melissa, referring to the stakeholders, how all these things, can contribute to a societal change because it is a long-term goal. I also think that through, advocating for, the amendment of the existing laws as well, that will help because it will make victims know that regardless of what, society is saying and the stigmas associated with that the law does protect them regardless. So I think that that's also a means through which, we can encourage more persons to seek redress, to report sexual assault, harassment, any offenses committed against them, as well as everything else. Yeah.
Wow, thank you guys so very much. I'm gonna take a look at the questions. In the meantime, Chelsea should be popping in right now, and just to share her thoughts on what's going on. So Chelsea, anytime you're ready.
Yeah, I've just been looking at the comments that have been popping up on YouTube and stuff, and I wanted to ask one. Let me pop it up right now. It asks, can we go more in depth on what is accepted as like evidence? Because sometimes it's usually like your word against his. Like, so how, if a survivor wants to seek redress, what would be some key things that they need to like have in their back pocket to make sure that they're good? Anybody?
This is a very complicated question. What is acceptable forms of evidence? As always, context is important when we respond to questions like this, because there was a time in Jamaica when it made no sense for you to go through the judicial process if you did not have a recent complaint, if you did not have somebody to corroborate, to support the complaint that you're making that you were sexually violated. Thankfully, as a result of advocacy, issues of corroboration is now out the window. So we don't need that as an evidential support item. But generally speaking, at the end of the day, most sexual violence cases are committed in private spaces. And so it is really the complainant's narrative and the accused narrative as to what occurred on the particular day. And so a lot of the assessment turns on credibility assessment. The judge is looking on, the judge is assessing the demeanor of the complainant, and the judge has to make a judgment. Am I persuaded that this is a credible witness and that I can accept the allegations being made against the accused? In other cases, you'll have forensic evidence. One of the cases that I was involved with, a Paul Lewis case, Reverend Paul Lewis, we had all the ingredients of the charge made out, willing complainants. We had our forensic report, which reflected that his semen was found on the crotch of the complainant's panty. But at the end of the day, a perverse verdict was given, a not guilty verdict was given, because the prosecution of sexual violence cases isn't prosecuted in an isolation. It's prosecuted in an environment where you have societal influences and you have other influences at play that sometimes result in what I call perverse verdicts that goes against the weight of the evidence. So just, to enumerate, if you're dealing with a complainant and a charge that requires age to be proven, like a child under the age of 16, you're looking at having a birth certificate to establish the birth of the complainant, and at the time of the sexual act, the person was underage. And if the birth certificate is not available, then you can call the mother who would have given birth to the child, for that mother to give oral evidence as to when the child was born. And then, you look at different forms of the forensic evidence, the semen. If depending on the type of sexual violence it is, you may have torn and bloody clothing. These are potential, evidential items.
Wow. Thank you so very much. And with that, we're up on our first break. I'm going to be reading a few of the comments from Twitter and Instagram, and as well as sharing a very shocking statistic, which is 1 in every 4 Jamaican women have or has experienced physical violence by a male partner. Like, did you guys know that? Isn't that staggering? Like, out of me, Melissa, Lauren, and Kayla, one of us, like on average, would have experienced some sort of sexual violence. And I just think that is crazy. And I think, even though these statistics can be kind of scary to think about, the more that we tell people these things and, just kind of get the points across and kind of stop hiding from the facts and from the reality, because a lot of us live in sheltered places. Like, I personally, you hear of somebody being sexually assaulted or something like that, but then it becomes more real when you know that person, and it's kind of just closing in on your circle and you can't avoid it anymore. So the more that we just say it, talk about it, post about it, do what we can do just to share information and spread the knowledge is I think a huge plays a huge role in creating that cultural and societal shift as well. So I'm going to read a few of the comments. And Kim is saying she hears so many persons speaking about not wanting to continue with their reports and how they were victimized. And this person is saying it's the lack of empathy, and that shows in how our enforcers kind of deal with the situations. And we also have somebody who agrees that sex ed should be a lot more important than just basic teaching, teaching students about body and confidence, sexual harassment, and how to go about reporting. I 100% agree with that. And let's just talk about this one very touchy topic that Joel commented about. It's about men being imprisoned due to women making false claims. And as much as it is very easy to always believe the victim, sometimes they're telling lies, and that is true. And it is a very sad occurrence, and that is why we have to have an isolated body that deals specifically with sexual harassment, so that as Melissa said, we don't have perverse judgments. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not really aware of the terminology, so that we don't have people doing unnecessary things and causing guilty people to go away free. So guys, remember to comment on our Instagram so that you could win a t-shirt. Okay, a very, very nice t-shirt that is "My name isn't sexiness." That's what's on there. You know how we can be called or nothing, and that t-shirt will set it straight. So I'm gonna go on here, see what Girls Who Know is saying. So this is the post. Let me see if you guys can see it. That's the post. I need to be commenting. I'm going to be choosing a winner. So let me just see. Should I wait until the end? Should I? Let me see. Should I wait until the end? Or should I choose one now? Whew. All right.
Hi,
Hey,
Shan.
Charles. What's up?
Yeah, I've been loving the conversation so far. Yeah, man, let's boost the people to enter the giveaway. Enter the giveaway, guys. We probably won't choose the winner until
The end.
so we're giving more people some time to enter and comment and tell us what they're looking forward to, and also what you've learned. My eyes have been open, and a lot of the stuff that I probably already was thinking has been like reiterated, and I love that people were commenting throughout and asking their questions. Let's keep it up, guys. We're going to be hopping into our second panel very soon, and then that will be all about the Sexual Harassment Bill, breaking down the bill, everything about the bill, what it's for, who it's for, what it is, what is a bill even, all of that. Because I feel like that's knowledge that we need to know, point blank, period. And sadly, it's knowledge that isn't easily accessible. Listen, when I went on Google and Googled the Sexual Harassment Bill, is the wrong bill come up,
Yeah.
Is the wrong bill.
That's crazy.
And then so we felt like it's just necessary to set some things straight. So if they don't want to make it easy, we're making it easy for you guys. So you literally just have to come, listen, and be engaged and ask your questions.
I agree. So we're gonna start back in like 5 minutes. So take a 5 minutes, grab some water, as I have right here.
Have some popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
Lock your lips, guys. Read your lips.
That's right.
Take a cute selfie.
Yes, I'm resharing things from Girls Who Know. Shout out to Lansdale and Esther for taking that snippet. So repost, reshare, everything.
Yes, guys, and you can tweet us. Tweet us on Twitter, hashtag Unfiltered 2020. I always say, we reward people who are active and listening and commenting, because we want to make sure that you guys are actually getting your questions answered, because this is for you. So we're just going to vibe a little and let's see what stood out. Let's hop over to the girls who know Twitter. All right. So yeah, we're seeing thoughts from Kayla and Lauren. Lauren was saying that the older generation needs to work on changing their mindset towards sexual harassment, which will help us to create an overall societal shift, which is very true. Very true. I was talking to my grandma a couple of days ago, and when we had first put out the statement, talking about Justice Minister, and saying that we're really upset and that shouldn't have happened. She was just like, hello, what wanna do? What wanna write up statement, and
Really?
yeah, and I mean, she didn't mean it in a bad way,
Right.
but it's just like, it just kind of showed me that we really, if you don't make the effort and the effort to like have a voice and make sure that your voice is heard and you consistently do that, then
Yeah.
yeah,
Then nothing will change.
nothing will change. Exactly. So that really was funny. I just kind of like reiterated that the older generation definitely needs to be clean.
We can't depend on them to make the change that we want to see. We just kind of have to do it ourselves. You know what I mean? Because they grew up differently, they're socialized differently, and they probably won't understand what our plight is and what our fight is, but it's not up to them to understand.
Exactly.
So
That's right.
Honestly, and I mean, they say we are the future.
exactly.
So it's now. It is now. Yeah. May I say?
Oh my gosh, that's right. So you guys still have a little bit over an hour left into the giveaway. It's on Instagram. Is it on Twitter as well, Chelsea? Or is it just on Instagram?
I think it's only
On Instagram. Yeah, because that's where the post is, and that's where you can comment below. It sounds good. So follow us on Instagram at Girls Who Know JA. That's right. If you're not following us, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. Why do you even have an Instagram account if you're not following? Like, what's the point?
Oh my God. We're super excited. So Antoinette and I are gonna hop off and let you do your thing. And reintroduce our panelists for another exciting and juicy educational panel.
Yes.
All right, sounds good. Okay, guys, so let's get into it. This second half of our segment today is entitled Breaking Down the Sexual Harassment Bill. What is it? Wait, no, why we have it? That's what we're going to answer. You don't have to know everything. All you need to do is have the passion for learning and to just, know more. It's all right. We're never born big. We'll come here to learn, and that's what we're going to do today. So let me reintroduce our panelists. And we have Lauren Less, Christopher Harper, Kayla Wright, and Melissa Sims. Let's get right into it. The first question, very basic. We're starting at level 0. What is a bill, and what does it even mean? Christopher, you could go ahead and take that.
All right. So it's an entire legislative process in terms of how we create law, and a bill is basically a proposed legislation. It's not an actual law. It's not enforceable. It's something that's created through the respective committee, brought before the houses of parliament. And parliament has both a lower house and an upper house, that be the House of Representatives and the Senate. Both have an opportunity to discuss the content of the bill, and then once that bill has been thoroughly discussed, and it's been green lighted by both, then it moves to the situation where it's adopted by the Houses of Parliament, and then subsequently it's what we call to be gazetted, and that's what makes it enforceable in law. So this is just a proposed legislation. So that's the difference between when you hear act as opposed to bill. So a bill is the proposed, and the act is the actual piece of legislation or the law which is enforceable. But it's not going to be enforceable unless it's been gazetted, which is one of those critical components. But I think the opportunity here is that it's not necessarily at that point where it's even before the House, but it's being ventilated, discussed, allowed for public submissions, and then it will be discussed by all members of both the lower house and the Senate.
Got you. Okay, so we have a good understanding of what a bill is, but specifically, Melissa, if you don't mind, what is this bill for? The Sexual Harassment Bill, what is it for? And obviously we've talked before that it really only protects women against rape, but a general understanding of what is this bill for? And also, I'm sorry, this is a very loaded one, but about how long before this bill, or how long it normally takes before a bill turns into, before it's gazetted, is that right? Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then turns into, actual law and act?
Well, the legislative process is a very long one, and how quickly it goes through the system is dependent on how critical it is for policymakers, for the government. I know when we were dealing with bills concerning the IMF program, those bills went very quickly through the system to becoming acts. But for other legislations, sometimes it takes many decades, sometimes a year, sometimes 5. But this sexual harassment bill, I believe, is a part of larger government policies. So there may be some imperative for them to push it through the House to have it become an act of parliament. I think in terms of what the sexual harassment bill is for, there clearly is some confusion as to what its purpose is. And when you look at the bill itself, that confusion may even be extended to policymakers. And so all of us, including stakeholders, really need to ask ourselves the question. We know the harm that we are trying to cure through legislating away the harm. How do we do this effectively? Firstly, one of the challenges with the bill is that it doesn't seem to make very clear distinction between different spaces. So in any adjudication process, you have kind of 3 distinct stages or phases. You have the criminal adjudication process, which this act does not speak to. You have the civil adjudication process, which this act speaks to, but it does so in a way that is very limiting. And then thirdly, you have a third space that I call a quasi-legal space, which is where matters are discussed without prejudice, without any legal consequences, and parties come to some agreement as to how to resolve them. This bill seems to be focused on 2 of those, which is the matter being solved by 2 parties in a quasi-legal space or an administrative space, and then the second phase of it being within the civil courts. I don't know if any of my other panelists would want to add to that before we continue the conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly to really speak to the whole issue of the length. To give a bit of a perspective is that this whole issue surrounding the need for a sexual harassment bill, how long has this process been, is that the first attempt surrounding this was really from about 2015, as I think that's what Chelsea was referring to earlier when she said she saw the wrong bill, because on the Parliament's website it's a 2015 version that's there, as well as the 2019 updated version. So you can see that even the whole deliberation surrounding whether or not we should even have this legislation is something that can take time. When you look to what international bodies, such as the UN and the respective committees, they've long been advancing or advocating for sexual harassment legislation in the country. Yet here we are 2020, and we're still, I guess, lagging in terms of how fast are we going to move in getting this this bill into law? And I think that just shows how long this process can even take. Because sure, we can have a conversation in 2020, but it doesn't actually fall through the relevant processes until 2025, 2030. And these are some of the things we always have to contend with as advocates.
Wow. Wow. So it's, and then now we always have a problem, not necessarily a problem, but I guess you could say an issue when it comes down to keeping the momentum. In the United States, with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, sometimes it's easy or it's very comfortable to run out of steam. You stop talking, you stop posting, you stop doing that, and knowing that you have to depend on the law, which is already naturally very slow in terms of acting and creating laws to really, kind of create that shift that we were talking about earlier. Then you have, I guess the onus is kind of on us to ensure that we don't run out of steam, ensure that we keep the conversation going, and kind of hold them accountable and not allow this to be one of those 10-year things. Imagine having to wait until, let's say I have a child, then that's, or even beyond that. So I think as advocates and people with, influence and presence, it's kind of really on us, since the judicial system is so lacking. My goodness, do you guys have any reservations about the proposed about the bill? Anything you'd like to target, any key points that you'd like to address and bring more attention to? Kayla or Lauren?
Meaning, if we find anything wrong with it?
Yeah. I know you have a problem with the males not being able to report rape. That's crazy.
Under the bill itself, there's no distinction, or I didn't see any distinctions as it relates to gender. So that's commendable. There's no, disparity in who can, file a claim for sexual harassment. However, I think one of the main problems that I do have with the bill, and I think a lot of persons had, was
Kayla, you're muted.
Oh, Kayla, could you just repeat? You were muted for a little bit.
Oh, I was saying that one of the problems that I have and other persons have is the limitation period to bring a claim for sexual harassment being 12 months. And I think that is unfair on the victim of sexual assault, because just the nuanced nature of harassment, itself, there's people, treat these things differently, they internalize these things differently, and the after effects manifest themselves differently. So I think having a limitation period on when you can bring a claim is also putting a limitation on the trauma of the victims. It's like, get over these things in the period of
12 months,
or just forget about even seeking redress. And I also think that in a way it protects the harassers, because they know and they are protected by the fact that after 12 months, nothing
they can't do anything.
They've essentially gotten away with what they've done. So that's one of the problems that I have with the bill itself.
Gotcha. Does any of our other partners? Go ahead, Lauren. Do you have anything you'd like to?
I saw in the bill it was proposed that in situations of workplace sexual harassment, it has to go through a process where it has to basically be approved by the higher ups before a legal action could be taken against the harassment, which I think is, I can't believe they could even conceptualize that and put that in a bill, because how can you give the jurisdiction to the employer as to whether or not an action can be brought against sexual harassment? I don't understand what was going through their mind when they typed that, when they said it, because a lot of the times it is the employer who is the sexual harasser. A lot of the times it is a small employee, a low level employee who basically has no voice in the business or in the workplace that is harassed, that is victimized. So when now this person is victimized, this person is harassed, and they're not able to make an action, they're further victimized by that. It's further victimization. So that is my qualm with this bill, amongst other things.
Oh, thank you, Lord. I'm going to go over to the chat on YouTube for a bit. We have some persons with some questions, and I just want to give you guys a chance to address them. So, Chit Chat with Shan says, one argument she saw that was brought up was the issue of resources needed for these cases. Like, I don't know if she could delve more into it, or you guys are familiar with it, but she's talking about resources needed for the cases. Hopefully she could give us some more information on what she means by resources. Are you guys familiar with that? Go ahead.
Well, certainly I think the chit chat might be focusing on the administrative support system that is required to support the process and receiving complaints of sexual violence. I am using the term sexual violence because I believe too many people view sexual harassment as bordering conduct that is acceptable, but is becoming unacceptable because we're living in an environment that is politically sensitive. But no. So sexual violence in the form of sexual harassment would require some resources in order for the matter to be developed. And touching on that particular issue, it highlights one of my challenges with the bill, because Jamaica has a culture which treats sexual harassment, depending on how it occurs, as a kind of acceptable form of conduct. In fact, I believe we have a senator who would have uttered, that sometimes she views the sexual harassment as some kind of affirmation of her attractiveness, which highlights the challenges that we have in our society dealing with the issue of sexual harassment. And so I think Jamaica, contending with such a deep cultural issue, should have had that reflected in the bill by requiring corporations and other institutions to ensure that they had mandatory courses that all their employers and employees must take on a year-to-year basis until we begin to have that culture shift where persons now understand that that kind of sexual violence is unacceptable behavior.
Right. She went on to say that in the sense that evidence is only helpful within a certain time period, which Kayla addressed, and heavy resources needed for rape kits and stuff like that. So she's saying I think that's what the person who said it meant. We addressed the part about the time limit on there, as well as I think they're going to be and I think those are things we have to be willing to invest in. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that should be a deterrent from implementing this bill. And somebody's trying to clarify whether or not the sexual harassment bill and sexual offenses, are those the same document? That's what they want to know. Is it the same thing? No. It's different. No. My God. How? Why? How so?
Well, contextually, they're different. The sexual offenses, we already have a Sexual Offences Act, but there is now a Sexual Offences Bill that is seeking to bring further amendments to the law that exists. So that bill primarily is located within the criminal courts, while the Sexual Harassment Bill is located within quasi-legal environment and the civil courts, and is also dealing with the matter as a non-criminal offense.
Gotcha. Got you. I understand that. Thank you so very much. Somebody's just sharing their experience on here about knowing somebody, like she knows someone who went to visit a partner. She was underage. She was 19. He raped her and she tried to report it. But of course, her parent would have to do so. right? Like the parent would have to step up and do so. That's what she's saying. The mother told the officers that she wanted it and she ended up getting pregnant, and it's not something that was ever addressed because she had no support. Any comments on that?
Well, nine. She was on the internet.
Yeah, I'll just give you a
Well,
second to
I
read it.
think the mention of 19 is a bit disconcerting because most of us are experienced with this statutory crimes speaks to persons who are 16 years and under. So once you
Right.
are over that age, you are really at liberty to consent to sexual activities. However, the matter becomes a sexual offense is if there's any coercion. So that would not be an underage crime, so to speak.
She is underage. The partner is 19.
Oh, the partner is 19. How old is the complainant?
He said the person said underage.
Okay. Anyone can report a crime.
Gotcha.
You don't need the consent of a parent to report a crime. Sometimes the very person you're reporting against is your father, an uncle, or a brother who would have sexually abused you. Because if you look at the statistics, the issue of incest, especially in some parishes, is actually concerning.
Gotcha. And Christopher, we know you have to leave, so we're gonna ask you one last question.
I mean, I
I
have
guess
some time
two.
still. I have some time.
Stay with us.
All right.
I have some time.
Yes. Okay. Well, we have him for the rest of the evening. I'm declaring it. But what would your recommendations be? You know, you have experience in this field. How could we make this bill more acceptable and more effective?
All right. So for me, is that I think that this is the perfect opportunity because when we look across the region, not many Caribbean countries actually have sexual harassment legislation. I believe Barbados, Belize have explicit sexual harassment legislation, but within limited circumstances, whereas other jurisdictions like Trinidad, for example, put sexual harassment in other laws surrounding discrimination, amongst other things. And I think Belize offers the most progressive because that's where we kind of took our guidance from because they took it beyond the workplace to also include institutions. But I think as legislators, they should be thinking, what are the mistakes recorded by other jurisdictions so that we ensure we don't repeat them? And I think in terms of this current legislation, we have a number of, I guess, challenges that we would also have made some recommendations. So the first one, as was mentioned earlier, is about this whole limitation period. I know Mel would have done a thread on Twitter, and that whole limitation issue, it's a bit up in the air. Especially for us at GFJ, because even when we've done our own research surrounding what limitations exist in different jurisdictions, you'll find that it's not as flexible as we think or as we'd like to hope. Because in some countries, it's at 180 days, 3 months.
Right.
But what we found is that in the UK, for example, where even though it's a 3-month limitation period, an individual would have the opportunity to bring a complaint under a different law, which has a limitation on a period of 6 years. So as you can see, there are certain nuances and differences that we have to appreciate.
Right.
But from an international law perspective, a UN perspective, their position on limitation periods is that no such thing should exist. Because when we think about these particular laws, we have to kind of appreciate where our culture comes in. The whole idea surrounding recovery, the effect of the harassment, the trauma that's usually associated with it. And it's not so quick where if we have an effective system, sure, 12 months might be an ideal, but we know we have challenges in terms of delays, amongst other things. Another gap that we would have noted specifically is that, yes, we commend the fact that it imposes a duty on employers, it imposes a duty on persons in charge of institutions, and institutions being like schools, places of safety, elderly homes, amongst other things, but it doesn't cover 2 things. One, third-party harassment. And when I say third-party harassment, I'm referring to if an employee is harassed by a client, a visitor, a customer, And when we think about it from an institutional level, it also speaks to staff members harassing students towards residents, but it doesn't speak to harassment that may take place between students, between inmates. And that for us is a big gap, because if it doesn't really protect, if it doesn't really offer the protection that's ideally contemplated around a progressive sexual harassment bill, and that is in and of itself a problem. And one thing that I have, or one issue around a lot of the discussions taking place, and especially when it gets to the parliamentary conversation, is that the courts will in some instances turn to the discussion that take place to interpret or to support their interpretation of it. And if it is clear that Parliament did not intend for the law to go this far, then the courts may, in some instances, be limited to that and say, well, that's the intention of Parliament. And if we're going to give it that kind of purposive interpretation, then that's how we will interpret, and that will pretty much guide all of it going forward. Another issue that we have with it, and I think they're a bit undecided about it, is the fact that it doesn't cover public spaces. I know when we talk about this, we speak to street harassment quite generally, but in our submissions at GFJ, we didn't broadly frame it as street harassment, but we said sexual harassment in public spaces, whereby allow the law to define what constitutes a public space, where our public space is. But the challenge that we have with it, and Melissa was saying it earlier, is that this is a quasi-judicial type of bill, and it doesn't really consider the criminal element safe for offenses, and it doesn't really offer that kind of civil redress that many persons are contemplative of, and that has its spin-offs. So if it's a tribunal, it's specialized, and we welcome it because it's a team of experts really evaluating a particular matter or a situation. But even if it issues awards, they're not able to enforce the award, but that has to go to the civil court for that kind of award if it's a compensatory type of award. And I realize that's quite consistent with like these type of tribunal settings. However, it does place a burden on the complainant, and the whole nature of a quasi-judicial body is that if you look at the language, it's not a claim, it's not anything legal per se that is being brought, but it's a complaint. And that strips a lot of the things being brought by victims of, I guess, a lot of the redress and the justice that could truly be accessible by the courts. And in many instances in other jurisdictions, the court is where these matters can be brought, but we chose to go the route of the tribunal. And I think when we do make these oral submissions before the committee, we might be asking, like, what was the logic behind taking the route of a quasi-judicial body as opposed to allowing victims to pursue the court for justice.
Right. As I said, there are lots of pros and cons. It's not just a straightforward thing. Wow. Whenever we think about laws and creating them, I think a lot of people think it's just like a cut direct thing, and it really isn't. You have a lot of people, lots of things to consider when you're creating these things. And as I said before, it falls on us as well to kind of see these loopholes that could be present in these bills and in these acts, and then act on it, because sometimes they might not even think about it. And we love to blame people. I'm like, oh, you didn't think about this, you're trying to do that, and we get very sensitive. And sometimes it's just on us to highlight an issue that they probably didn't even realize, and bring that forward. So that's why we have to keep on, reading these things and taking the onus upon ourselves to ensure that, it's fair and it is practical and that it will actually work. So, and Lauren and Kayla, I know that you guys worked on a submission from Girls Who Know. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Either one.
Oh, well, for my contribution to the submission, it was what I discussed earlier, the limitation period. That's what I was responsible for. And I expressed the same sentiments, that I think it's unfair, putting a limit on trauma.
Yeah, gotcha.
But there are other persons who were involved as well. I know Sade is here. I don't know if she's going to comment what she did. I hope she does, but yeah.
Yeah, hopefully Sade does. And with that, I'll take a look at the comments that are on YouTube right now, and I'll just give a little shout out. Remember to enter our giveaway on Instagram right now. We're giving away a nice shirt, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to be announcing the winner at the end, but I'm going to get to the comments right now. And so we have here, Sade is actually expressing an incident that she experienced recently with a taxi man. Let me just let you guys know, like, these taxi men, they can be the scariest thing ever. And she's saying that he relentlessly tried to pursue her, tried to touch me, and even made me drive myself home because I wouldn't give him my number. Isn't that scary? Oh my goodness. So she just it's crazy how that does not surprise me. Like, I don't put it past Jamaican taximen, and it's not just a Jamaican thing. I don't put it past taximen in general. And it's somebody in our midst, somebody who we know has gone through that. That could have taken a turn for the worse. Okay, but praise God, you're still here, Sade. And I really hope that you have him license plate down and kind of just can share that, because it can be a little bit scary if you don't want to talk about your experiences, but it really can help somebody avoid that taxi later on and save a life. So thank you for sharing your experience, and I hope you have some details about that, guy, so we could share it about and help other young girls not go through that same thing that you did. Also, could anyone of you guys outline the process of securing a restraining order, and also share your inputs on how effective they are? Do you have any experience with that, Melissa?
I have very limited experience with that. I know that you can obtain orders under the Domestic Violence Act, and that would require you going through the resident magistrate's court to have that matter dealt with by taking out a complaint or an information matter there. In terms of their effectiveness, the question highlights one of the challenges with our situation in Jamaica, which is that we're not data driven. So there is no place to go to look to see whether there's any statistical information which would indicate whether such restraints are actually effectively being used by complainants, or whether the number of such orders that would have been sought by persons through the courts.
All right, so I can add, so in terms of the whole thing about restraining orders, I know a lot of persons, that's what they understand it to be because it's familiar to them. They hear it from the US, but what we actually have is a protection order under our domestic legislation. And usually what happens is that you can go to the parish court or the family court, and you fill out a form or have one of the court staff help you to fill out the form, and that form has to basically be accompanied by an affidavit, which is basically that document setting out all the circumstances, all the facts, and then that matter, well, the forms are basically given before the court, and a date is set for the matter to be heard. You're given a notice to give to the abuser, and then both parties come and they basically present the evidence, and the court will decide whether or not it's going to grant the order. But there are a number of problems with it because, one, our domestic violence legislation only covers 2 forms of harassment or abuse. And as you know, abuse takes many forms. Currently, it only speaks to physical or mental abuse. So it doesn't have anything about financial abuse, nothing about sexual abuse, and nothing about psychological abuse. So if a person experiences any of those things, they would not be eligible for a protection order unless they can actively demonstrate in the affidavit that as a result of that sexual abuse, they suffered some form of physical abuse. Another problem with it is that this whole standard at which it determines whether or not to grant a protection order is that a victim has to come before the court and basically say that an abuser has used or has threatened to use violence against, which has caused physical or mental injury. But here's a problem with it. They also have to demonstrate that that abuser is likely to do so again. So the problem with this is that there's no one-off type of situation where if I'm abused on one occasion, I would be eligible for an order under the courts. And that's a fundamental problem, but the even greater problem is, sure, it has criminal mechanisms in place where if an abuser breaches an order. So let's say a victim goes to the court, applies for the order, gets the order, and it's in place for, let's say, a year. And it sets out everything that the abuser is prohibited from doing. If an abuser breaches that, then the police officers have jurisdiction to arrest and charge for breaching the order. But the problem is this legislation was drafted in 1996, reviewed in about 2004. So, our penalties are commensurate with that period. So if an abuser breaches an order, it's $10,000 or 6 months in prison. And whenever I have this conversation, a lot of persons are shocked because they're like, $10,000 in a 2020, like it's no, and when you think about the principles of criminal law, it's no deterrent, it's no like prohibition, because you're just going to breach the order, pay off the 10 grand and call it that, because that's what it's capped at. And those are just some of the fundamental flaws associated with the protection order, occupation order, that truly limits victim protection in our country.
Wow. Oh my God. So hold on. So what in Jamaica? That was a lot just now. I have to break it down a little bit. In Jamaica, what we have, or what we call it, is a protection order, right? What I'm aware of is somebody like not being able to come in within certain amounts of like some distance. What is that the same thing here with our protection
order? We're hopeful
order?
because that's not covered under protection order. So it doesn't speak to the specific terms in terms of you cannot come within 50 feet of me. It prohibits a person from being in the same place, or from lay waiting, from watching, from tormenting, from communicating consistently, persistently, amongst other things. But it's not so specific. And that's a recommendation that we had made, because Trinidad's domestic violence legislation, which is arguably one of the more progressive ones in the region, would have inserted in it that the prohibition can actually state the amount of meters that a person can be within, but our law doesn't. So that's why it's different from a restraining order, because it doesn't restrain a person how we know restraint to be in or American parlance and all of that. But that's we have some serious gaps to get over.
Wow. That I don't know, but you just blew my mind. That is crazy. So, and then now you just want somebody to pay off 10 grand. 10 grand from 1996 is not equivalent to 10 grand in 2020. It's at least 50. At least 50 grand. And that, wow, whoever asked that question about restraining order, it was a question that I didn't even know that I had. Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna be going on our Instagram quickly just to see what people are saying on here, and I might just have to choose a winner right now. Let's see what's going on. Girls who know JA, ensure that you are following.
All right, guys.
Oh my God.
Hop in real quick to ask a few questions. So going back to the sexual harassment bill, is it a case where, or let me know, correct me if I'm wrong, is it a case where survivors who complain, right, if their complaint is deemed as frivolous, can they be charged criminally? And can you differentiate or like make clear what kind of like charge is going to be made? Say when somebody like charges, or somebody goes to complain about being sexually harassed. The person go ahead.
Okay, because in this bill it's proposed that there is a charge for no more than $1 million for a false claim. That's a sexual harassment bill. And girls who know, we put in our parliamentary submission against this, because we believe that it is sort of intimidating, a $1 million cap. Because look at that, restraining order is $10,000. But when you cannot adequately prove your sexual harassment, it doesn't necessarily have to be your fault, because as you say, Jamaica lacks the resources to adequately prosecute somebody under certain sexual harassment and sexual offenses. So the cap is $1 million. And Girls Who Know, in our submission, we advocated against it being so high and for them to lower it because $1 million is sort of intimidating. Like imagine somebody harass you now. You go try to put in action against them in the court. You don't have any sort of proof, and then you get charged $1 million on top of the demonization in our society because that is the next thing that is intimidating. So the $1 million, in our opinion, is way too high. That is way too high of a cap.
I
Because
agree.
if certain things are not $1 million that are actually of substance, things that matter, why would we further victimize sexual harassment survivors?
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Lauren. And thank you, Christopher, so much for joining us today. Oh my goodness. All these panelists are, you guys are so knowledgeable. My God, I should have pursued law instead of engineering. What am I doing with my life? Oh my goodness.
Not
But
too
thank
late.
you so much, Christopher. Would you say, Melissa?
It's not too late.
Oh my, thank you, Christopher. I know you have to leave, but we really, really appreciate your contribution, not just to this forum, but to Jamaica's legislative movement and just everything that you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a really good day. Oh, you're muted. I figure more or less you're saying thank you. Have a good day, Christopher. All right, so I'm going to choose a winner. Oh my goodness, I feel under pressure. I don't like choosing things in a deep. And with that, I'm also gonna look at the comments. I just want to make this feel as interactive as possible, and just share some of what our um, virtual guests are thinking. So Daniel says yes, very informative discussion. Christoph Ellis says protection order sounds like a waste of time in the end. Well, we have to start somewhere, Christoph. We have to start somewhere. And then Kim says $1 million is crazy, and they don't even charge $1 million for anything else regarding sexual harassment. I think it's crazy too, Kim. And oh yeah, Kim says, of course, yes, I actually mix it up. So Zoe says it's crazy. I agree with you, Zoe. And Kim, yes, it's easy for someone to pay off 10 grand. They need to go back and make some changes. I agree with that, Kim. Michaela is saying, I really enjoyed this discussion, super informative, honestly. And yeah, we just have Girls Who Know chiming in, thanking one of our panelists, Christopher Harper. We really, really appreciate not just Christopher, but Melissa and Lauren and Kayla for taking the time out of their busy days to be with us today. And yeah, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback here on the live stream at YouTube. And now I have to choose a winner for the t-shirt. Oh my God. Chelsea, you sure you don't want to choose the winner? Why it have to be me?
Girl,
Who am I gonna choose?
it's you. It's you. But while you choose,
All right.
I want to thank our lovely or esteemed panelists for really hopping on here today and clearing up some things. I didn't know a lot of those things. I didn't know that we didn't have a restraining order here in Jamaica. And this gives me hope really that, no matter how bad things may seem, there's still people out here doing the work. Lauren, Kayla, you guys are young and vibrant and, coming up as, budding lawyers. So I guess my final question to wrap up before Shanti announces the winner is, what three things or what charge do you want to leave with a young survivor or a young person watching the summit right now?
Well,
I can go, Melissa.
no, go ahead, Kayla.
I'd like to know I would like any survivor to know that their feelings are valid. They shouldn't be afraid to come forward because there's always a community of persons who will be willing to stand behind them and back them. And to just stay positive because change is coming and it's coming soon. Yeah.
I would say to any survivors, I feel you. I feel your pain. I understand. And I understand the fear that you might have when it comes to reporting or coming forward with what happened to you. But you have to understand that your voice, your survivorship, you surviving that is inspiration to other survivors. You coming forward, your bravery in coming forward is an inspiration to so many other women and men who have been impacted by sexual assault and sexual violence because we know how prevalent it is. But as Kayla said, I believe a change is coming. And you, in you being who you are, being brave and understanding your feelings are valid, you are part of the revolution.
Yes. Personally for me, in relation to survivors, I often leave a word of essentially the sexual violence. Don't let it become the thing that defines your life. And certainly, one of the lessons I always go to the Mandela lesson that as a human being, you can survive very harrowing circumstances without losing your humanity, without losing your own sense of value, and without losing your ability to create a better reality for your own self and other people who will benefit from that shift in you. So that is usually my final word to survivors. Do not let it define your life. A terrible thing has happened to you, deal with it, but do not let it define your life. If it is going to define your life, it must be in a positive way to say, having endured such, kind of personal violence, that I survived it, and that in spite of that, I thrived.
Wow, in spite of it, we thrive. And with that, the person that's going to be thriving in a brand new t shirt is Mandemore the 101. Congratulations, Mandemore. You're the winner of a brand new t shirt. Okay, girls, strut your stuff in or custom. My name is not sexiness t shirt. Congratulations to you, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and just your presence with us today. We're extremely grateful. Sending virtual hugs to you and to you, and thank you guys so very much. Chelsea, do you have any closing statements you'd like to give? And
Definitely.
please remember to join us at 7 p.m. and or Girls Who Know Instagram, where Antoinette will be giving us a nice wind down summary of today's proceedings. Thank you so very much for having me. It was wonderful being your host virtually. It's Shantae Shant, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for day 2.
Yes. So now we will just pop in Antoinette Hines to, talk about what's happening tonight. So thank you guys for coming to the first staging, the first day of the hashtag Unfiltered 2020 Understanding Sexual Harassment Summit. I learned a lot, and I hope you guys learned a lot as well. So tonight at 7, it is our summit summary.
Sorry, yes.
Take it away, Antoinette.
At 7, we'll be having our summit summary, and basically we will just be condensing everything that was discussed today on our IG live, which will be, obviously posted on the page as well for people who missed it to catch it back. And yeah, we just want to give you guys, a rundown of everything that was discussed, quick takeaways so that you can really have it cemented in your spirit and in your brains, just so that you're fully educated and empowered as a result. And yes, so just in case if you missed the stream today, you can catch a summary later at 7. So ensure you are following us at Girls Who Know JA on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Well, also, guys, be sure to, you're on YouTube and Facebook. Make sure that you're clicking the reminders for the other days.
Yes.
It's same time at the same place, 12 to 2 Central or Jamaican time, or 1 to 3, Eastern or American time. Tomorrow, we're going to be diving into like understanding gender inequality. We're going to be talking with, men and boys about how we raise boys that respect women through comprehensive sexuality education. We're going to have panelists like Professor Adisa Palmer. Hope I said it right. Yes. She's just going to be giving us a lot of like cultural context about gender inequality, as well as Carla Moore as well. So we have a jam-packed, lovely, juicy convos coming your way tomorrow. So make sure you're here, same place, same time. You can email, set your reminders, and remember to tune in at 7 tonight on the IG. So that's it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed. And as I said, change is coming. So stay strong.
Is here. Yes, so I definitely want to thank everybody who joined today. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for engaging with us. Those who asked questions, shared stories, or commented, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we definitely hope to see you guys tuned in again tomorrow, same place, same time. If you subscribe to our YouTube, you'll be able to also turn on notifications for when we go live so that you won't miss tomorrow's stream. So yeah, thank you again from the Girls Who Know family, the Girls Who Know team. We are here for you, and yes, catch you tomorrow.
Catch us tonight. Bye, guys.
Bye.